Hello, everyone. It looks like the time for the webinar has already come.
Hi,
If you
hello.
can let us know on the chat, if you can hear us and see us, it will be perfect. It looks like you are hearing us. Perfect. Thank you. Today, the webinar is connected with the value of Atlassian tools. So how to get the most from the current Atlassian tools you have and why we are talking about that. But before we will move forward, then few organizational thing at the beginning. So first of all, the whole webinar is recording. You will get access to it after the webinar. If you have any questions to us during the webinar, let's put them on the chat. So at the end, we'll have the whole section for your questions and answers. Great. Moving forward, we are representing Divinity. Divinity is Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner and Platinum Marketplace Partner. There are more than 350 people on board right now. Probably you already know that we're conducting migration, and migrations is really popular topic in the Atlassian ecosystem. Our success is zero rollback on the Jira production migration, which we are feeling is a huge success when we are speeding the flow of migration to the cloud for our customers. We are plenty of time in the Atlassian ecosystem, more than 90. My name is Katarzyna Dorożurkowska. You can call me Kat, as head of Atlassian Services and Divinity, working in the Atlassian ecosystem for more than 15 years. With me today is Simon. So a few words about you.
Hi, hello. My name is Szymon Szerewicz. I'm Atlassian DevOps team leader at Divinity. At Divinity, I am already 7 years. And my team is mostly responsible these days for cloud migration, but still we do a lot of DC upgrades, customization, and we do everything what happened in Atlassian stack background.
Thank you, Simon. Before we will move to the agenda of the today webinar, as always, we have a bonus for you. At the end of the webinar, we will tell a little bit more about that. If it will be interesting, and let's stay until and wait for the details. This is a question to you, so if you can use the chat and answer. Does your organization view Jira as a necessary IT cost or a strategic business asset? It depends on the customization, on the organization, but we feel it's really important to know that. The best answers depends who is looking, and we understand this really, really perfectly. Thank you guys for your activity. It's really important for us to get connected with what we are saying and getting the answers. Why we are feeling this is important, because we sometimes hear that Jira is underused, or we feel and we see that it's underused in the organization. Underusing Jira is coming with the hidden costs that most organizations don't realize. They are direct costs, like the unused licenses and paying for redundant apps, indirect costs like slow onboarding of people, productivity loss, or technical debt, and the strategic cost like the leadership who is losing trust into data flowing from Jira, or the innovation stalls. Sometimes what looks like just the way we are using Jira can actually be quite expensive for the organization, and we need to have this in mind. Because of that, we created the webinar, and the content of today's webinar is around the 6th dimension of the proper usage of Jira. First, we'll be connected with the strategy. Second, we'll go through the documentation and how it can block continuity when we have missing documentation around what we have implemented. Then everything connected with system hygiene. Then we will move to the Jira UX and the compliance, which is really important, and the value of the Jira itself. At the end, as I said already, there will be a Q&A. One more time, if you have any question during the webinar, anything we will be saying about, let's put the question on the chat and we'll try to answer all of them at the end. A quick overview, why we are thinking about those 6 categories. We have implemented our internal framework for that, and we see that those 6 dimensions are the clever use of Atlassian, and by thinking about that, they are really important to be implemented properly. There is no proper strategy and development without documentation. If you are not implementing the system hygiene properly, the UX will be harmed. There will be a problem with security and compliance. And at the end, there won't be value from the reporting and we will not be meeting the KPIs. That's why we will be going through those 6 dimensions. We will start with strategy and development and move forward to the next one during the webinar. Without a strategy, every team configures Jira differently. What looks like flexibility quickly can become fragmentation. Common symptoms are hundreds of workflows, duplicate fields, inconsistent naming. Admins get stuck on firefighting rather than improving the platform. This is why the strategy is not nice to have, but it's a foundation for everything. We saw this plenty of times when it wasn't implemented. Simon, I believe you have a great story about one of our customers.
I've got a story from one of our customers. They are a service company. They grew to 12 teams and they let Jira evolve organically for 4 years. Each team customized everything in their own way. They created separate versions for the same customer, client, account, field, text here, drop down there. They built project-specific workflows and used inconsistent project and issue type naming. Then leadership asked for a simple report, top 20 customers by lead time. It couldn't be trusted because customer lived in multiple different fields and done meant different things across the teams. So the results was manual Excel cleanup, arguments about definitions, and admin spends their time on expectations and firefighting instead of improving the platform. Without a plan, Jira doesn't scale, it fragments.
Yes, you are completely right with that. There are plenty of symptoms around the different roles, which are saying that there is a proper or not a proper strategy. Different roles experience lack of consistency in a very different way. So from overload admins to skeptical executives, each pain point shows why a clear strategy is essential, how we can find the symptoms and what is the business impact. You can dive into that and think if this is something you have already experienced on your side and you are hearing those topics. If not, we need to think about the fixes. That's why we have something which can help you in this area. Simon, the first one, maybe for you.
The first one, a governance in board. When Jira is rolled out by team without a common plan, everyone customizes it to their own needs. So at first that feels flexible, but soon it turns into a patchwork, hundreds of workflows, countless fields, and no easy way to report across projects. The first and the most important fix is to establish a governance board. Think of it as a steering committee for Jira. This group sets a single direction for how the platform evolves. Instead of every team adding their own structures, the board reviews requests, defines standards, and ensures that changes benefit to the entire organization. The payoff is cleaner system that scales, supports strategy, and doesn't require endless firefighting from administrators.
Thank you, Simon.
What does the governance board actually do on a daily basis? 4 key things. First, it's centralized decision, no more surprise custom fields or workflows. Every change is reviewed and approved. Second, it defines standards like consistent naming, reusable workflow templates, and field usage rules. Third, it prioritizes improvements so most valuable ones are implemented first. And finally, it owns Jira evolution, turning it into a managed strategic platform rather than a collection of quick fixes. And with these responsibilities clearly defined, Jira stays coherent and future-proof.
Okay, so let's move to the second fix we have prepared. A governance board without a roadmap, it's still reactive. The roadmap is about creating a step-by-step plan. For example, you can plan the cleanup and the standardization for the Q1. Then at the Q2, you are thinking about automation and UX improvements. Q3 is the time for reporting and BI integration. And you need to think that the order matters, because you reduce chaos at the beginning, improve the user experience, and then demonstrate the business value for the proper people. When we are thinking about the cleanup and standardization criteria, we always have in mind the key actions and the success metrics, because without the success metrics, we won't be able to prove that what we have implemented is proper and it's working. It's a matter of vision and proof. Success metrics are really important in everything we are implementing. You can deep dive into that after the webinar. You will get access to this. In terms of the automation UX optimization, there is also different initiative we suggested here with the key actions and success metrics, which you can use as a baseline for your organization, because not everything will be one-to-one proper for you. The third part connected with the advanced reporting and optimization, exactly this is the baseline for the plan you can implement. And at the end, really important things that the roadmap prioritization Canva, because there can be plenty things you want to implement, but you need to figure out what is really important and should be implemented first. That's why we are always saying that everything you have in mind, you need to check the business impact, if it's high or low, and the complexity. There will be things we can call quick wins, where the strategic business impact will be really high and the complexity is really low. So you can start with that. But if you find something really complex, really hard to implement, and the business impact it's not so huge, then maybe you need to change the thing you are planning and leave it at the end of the queue of everything you want to implement. This is everything connected with the strategy of implementing Atlassian using in your organization. Let's move forward to the second dimension, which we mentioned at the beginning, around the documentation and why it's really important.
Documentation is often seen as optional, but it's the backbone of healthy Jira instance. Without it, this critical knowledge sits in a few people's head. So when they leave or change roles, new admins face a steep learning curve and everyday operations slow down. A single well-structured knowledge base, typically in Confluence, solves this. It captures how Jira is configured, why certain decisions were made, and how to perform routine tasks. That means faster onboarding, smoother audits, and fewer repeated questions from teams. Here we've got one scenario from one of our customers. One main admin, let's call him Bob, managed everything, projects, permissions, workflows, automations, but keep the know-how in his head and private notes. There were no runbooks and no explanation of why things were configured a certain way. When Bob left the company, the new admin was afraid to make changes without breaking shared schemes. Simple requests stalled for weeks while they reserve engineered the setup. Meanwhile, users flooded support with how does this works. Questions, onboarding slowed down, and delivery suffered because people couldn't use Jira consistently, and this onboarding process for that admin takes at least half of the year. Here, tribal knowledge becomes operational debt, and you pay it at the first turnover. Here we've got documentation table symptoms. How can you tell your documentation isn't doing its job? Start with onboarding time. If few admins or users needs weeks to get productive, that's a warning sign. Another clue is recurring support tickets for the same issues. People can't find answers on their own. Lack of clear change history is also a risk. Without it, you can track who changed what and when. Finally, if key information is spread across emails and chats, audits will be stressful and error-prone. Recognizing these symptoms early lets you fix them before they become critical. And the good news is the improving documentation can be straightforward. Start by creating single source of truth, as for example, a central Confluence space works well. Populate it with runbooks for routine admin tasks and step-by-step onboarding checklists for new users. Enable automated audit logs, so every configuration change is recorded without manual effort. Encourage teams to update content continuously, not just during big projects. Over time, this living knowledge base reduces repeated questions, speed up audits, and frees administrators to focus on higher value improvements.
Perfect. So for those of you who are still not on the cloud, what we need to bring to the table right now is that migration without documentation is a nightmare. If you didn't have any information around the processes you have implemented, it will be really hard to make sure they will be working exactly the same way in the cloud. There are, of course, those three areas here for continuity, compliance, and productivity, which in general is saying that documentation is a must. But migration is a huge turning point in the way of thinking for most of the customers we were working with until today. Let's have this in mind as an example. Why is a proof for a need in this area? And for those who are on cloud, it's still a must for you to have it, or at least having know what's going on in terms of the way of implementation on your side. Let's move forward to the third area, which is system hygiene and maintenance.
When the system hygiene is not in good shape, Jira gradually turns into a jungle. Unused fields, outdated schemes, and old apps accumulate. Page could load slower, searches take longer, and the dashboards give inconsistent results. Frustrated users may abandon Jira and track work in spreadsheets or chat, undermining the very reason you adopted the tool. Preventing this is crucial. Schedule regular cleanups, monitor growth of custom elements, and prune what isn't used. It's far easier to maintain order than to rescue a system that has already become overgrown.
There are quick fixes that help teams instantly. Let's focus on the field usage audit, because reviewing all the custom fields can help you identify which actually are used in the project. So which can be retired or merge duplicates to have it more easy to use. Workflow simplification is the second thing we are always thinking about, because we saw instances where there were plenty of variation, almost the same workflow, or the workflow was so complicated that almost no one were able to answer the question why it's so complicated, why we need to have so many steps during the workflow, etc. And the app rationalization. This is something we are hearing from the customer, because all those marketplace apps are mostly paid, and you pay separately from the Jira features and the subscription for Jira Confluence. So when you are making the decision of spending money for it, make sure that you will use it not only one feature, but the whole bunch of features which those products can help you with. This is the example of the Jira instance hygiene table. You can deep dive after the webinar. In terms of the area, the impact, and the quick fixes we suggest. This is a baseline. This is not, we are not saying that this is 100% accurate for everyone, but at least when we are planning your cleanup, let's start from it and think what you can implement and you can add to your instance hygiene table audit. Going forward with that, a regular cleanup routine is something that transforms Jira from a jungle into a reliable platform. Simon already said that it's much easier to make order when you have at least the starting point of having order on the instance than really doing the huge cleanup after a few years of using the Atlassian products. By saying that, we want to land in the fourth dimension, which is the user experience and how misaligned setup can hurt the Jira UX. So at the beginning, I would say that the poor UX is the fastest way to kill adoption, and the adoption is the key point in usage of any IT product. from there can be common issues for 20 plus field on the screens, confusing status, over-engineered workflows. By consequences here, we mean higher training costs, frustrated users, or inaccurate data. Quick wins you can implement are connected with the simplifying screens, reduced workflow complexity, unifying layouts. So in general, when Jira is easier to use, people actually want to use it. So we see plenty of implementation when after a year or two, it turns out that this is just a ticket board, nothing more, but no one really used Jira for managing the work. They are looking for separate tools, and the number of tools in the organization is growing because Jira wasn't implemented properly at the beginning. Simon, I feel you have a story around
I
it.
have a story here. We can imagine a fast-growing product org kept adding helpful fields, custom screens and workflow steps to Jira. Over time, creating a single ticket became a mini form, 25 plus fields, many unclear, multiple required drop-downs and transitions that ask for information users didn't have yet. Even simple requests took minutes and people weren't sure what to pick, so they picked anything just to move on. Adoption started to break quietly. Teams shifted to Slack and spreadsheets for real work, then copied a summary into a Jira at the end or not at all. So data quality collapsed, wrong fields, missing value, inconsistent status, reporting became useless, automation misfired, and leadership lost trust in dashboards. Admins respond by adding more rules and validations, making Jira even harder to use. So soon Jira became a compliance checkbox instead of system of record. And the org paid twice, once for the license and again for duplicate tracking meetings to reconcile the real status and missed handoffs. Bad UX doesn't just hurt users, it destroys data, governance, and decision making.
Exactly. What are the setup fixes that significantly improve the UX? There are plenty of ideas starting from the reducing to only essential fields which users actually need. Because when your Jira has 10 plus years history in your organization, there was a huge amount of the ideas what we should have on our screens and our workflows, but it's not working exactly the way we want today as a modern company. You can merge duplicate workflows, you can avoid having 10 plus statuses, doing exactly the same. And we always advise to start with a simple to do in progress done as a baseline and add if something is really necessary. There is plenty of the examples here. I want to move to the next part of this topic. So why the poor Jira configuration costs you and how you can seed those costs, because there are mostly common risks are the extra paying for the trainings, especially for the new people in the organization. The barrier of starting using the tool can be really high. The admin's workload, the recurring tickets, paying twice for the same functionalities in different products, the shadow ID adoption and the duplicate works, which we can avoid. So there are four main areas: trainings, admin workload, licensing and apps, and the internal policies. Think about the impact on your organization and ask where you need to improve to make sure that the adoption will be higher. By higher adoption, we also mean the value of the tool for the organization. And the higher it is, the more people really use the product, it's much easier to make sure that everyone in the organization treat this product as a must-have product. Let's move to the fifth dimension, which is security and compliance, and deep dive into it for a second.
Security problems often go in silence. Too many users with global admin rights, former contractors who still have access or missing audit logs may go unnoticed until something goes wrong. When a breach or compliance review occurs, proving what happened, containing damage is extremely difficult. Preventive measures like regular permission reviews, automated logging, And strict approval workflows are your best defense. They ensure you can demonstrate control at any time. And here also I've got a live scenario from one of our customer. Client brought in contractor to help with Jira administration during a busy period. The project ended, everyone moved on, and no one removed his access. He still had a valid account belonging to old groups and had visibility into spaces where commercial work happened. Months later, contractor and the client went after the same public tender. While the client was preparing the bid, the contractor quietly logged in the client's Jira instance and found the ticket third with submitted offer attached with pricing, scope, and delivery committees. That information gave the competing bid the safe advantage. The client lost the tender. Once the situation came to the light, it escalated beyond IT cleanup into a legal, reputational, and board-level damage control. The final outcome wasn't just losing a contract, it was losing trust and ultimately the customer relationship. Access left behind becomes leverage in the wrong hands, and you only notice after the damage is done. Here we've got examples, also different examples of security risk and consequences. Let's look at real scenarios. Legacy projects may contain personal data and remain publicly accessible. Old marketplace apps can have unpatched vulnerabilities. An excessive number of administrators increase the risk of accidental or malicious changes. Without an audit trail, it's impossible to prove compliance with GDPR or HIPAA. Consequences include reputational damage, regulatory fines, and costly remediation. These examples highlight why security must be built into everyday Jira administration. Here we've got table. Are you audit compliance ready? You can use this as example. Being audit ready means you can show evidence of control at any time, not only when inspection is scheduled. Every change to workflows, schemes, or permissions should be logged with who approved it and why. User access should be reviewed regularly to remove dormant accounts. An incident response plan tested at least once a year ensures you meet requirements like GDPR 72 hours breach notification. With these elements in place, compliance checks become routine and stress-free for you. And here we've got a risk to fix. What can you do? The final slide links common risk to concentrate actions. Too many admins introduce regular access reviews and the principle of least privilege. Unmatched integrations, disable or configure those without a clear owner. And no breach response plan. Draft one with all key stakeholders. Treat this table as a living playbook, review it quarterly, assign responsibilities, and track progress. By systematically address each risk, you can not only protect data and meet compliance standards, but also build trust with leadership and users.
Thank you, Simon. We have landed on the sixth dimension, which I was saying about at the beginning, and why the lack of metrics hides the real value. So let's begin with the story. Without the metrics, the leadership sees Jira just an IT tool, nothing more. The symptoms for that are, for example, no dashboard, no SLA visibility, manual reporting done weekly, monthly. There are quick fixes like standardized dashboards, translate technical data into business KPIs, and integrate with BI tools. Because reporting shows the ROI of Jira and makes it relevant to the business leaders. It's really important to make sure the data we are showing and the way we are presenting them will be understandable for people who are sometimes not technical. Let's have in mind that people who are thinking about the tools and organization, sometimes they are making the decision based on intuition rather than the real value, the KPIs, and everything visible in this product. The fixes which can make in Jira visible can be standardized dashboards, which enterprise data suitable for specific personas in our organization. The KPIs should be rather business oriented than only technical ones. The BI integration is also important because sometimes Jira reporting is not enough. And using dashboards and BI tools like EasyBI, Atlassian Analytics, or separate tools where we integrate like Power BI or Tableau, it's getting much easier for stakeholders to understand the value of the product. You can implement dashboards, for example, for SLA trends. That this is the screenshot from one of the app for in this area. You can think about the backlog health, the cross-team velocity. Depends on the organization and the organization needs, and we need to think that the needs from the organization and the people which we are talking about the value of the tool is the first point when we are thinking about that. At the end, what I want to say it's the preparing of the reporting process is a step-by-step routine. So you need to start with defining goals, then clean the data because Jira is the must. You are building the dashboards, validating, sharing, and improving it during the time because sometimes the needs of the leadership is changing and we need to find the proper way for that. Just a quick summary, those categories and dimensions are connected with each other. So there won't be a proper strategy without the documentation, without the proper showing of the value with the proper reporting. So let's think about them as highlights and the areas you need to deep dive, and then deep dive into each of it and think what you have and what you need to do to make sure you are getting more from the Jira tools. If there's anything coming to your mind or you have a technical question and don't know where to start with it, the bonus I was saying about at the beginning is connected with the free system hygiene and maintenance audit. This is something we are giving to all of you today. If you want to use it, reach out to me or Simon after the webinar, and we will make sure that we will find out what is missing on your organization and suggest the proper quick wins and the recommendation from our side. One more time, is of course free of charge. This is our bonus for you today. Here is the email address for me. At the end, we'll also share it with you. You will also get the link to the Knowledge Hub after the webinar. There you can find all the replays from the previous webinars, infographics, presentation like this one you can see right now. There will be also a recording soon from today's webinar. You can use it. You will get the link just after the webinar. By saying that, we are moving forward to the Q&A part. We have already some question to answer, so we will start to do this. In case anything is coming to your mind, write it on chat and we will move forward with everything else which we will see during this part. Simon, I am starting and let's see who will be answering the question. Is it possible to track how much a certain status change has occurred across multiple tickets to identify bottlenecks? For instance, is it possible to track if a batch of tickets has changed statuses back and forth to see how often delays in handover from product team to teams occur?
Yes, partially out of the box, but you need to use some kind of light customization. You can just use control chart and accumulative flow. You can spot where work piles up to count back and forth status changes across many issues. You either need add tiny automation rule that increments, let's say, bounce counter whenever a ticket flips between those statuses and dashboard. Or you can use a marketplace app like timing status, transition count for reporting, or you can just export this data to some kind of BI tool that gives you both a frequency of ping-ponging and delay at that handover.
I believe there can be a little bit more inside of this question, but I don't. I feel we can park it. Maybe we should meet after the webinar to deep dive what is the need and maybe suggest some resolution for that. Okay, let's move forward to the second question. Do you have similar best practices for the strategic value of Confluence? So first of all, there are similar cases, but we are always using the Jira examples. So maybe this is something which just came to my mind. Jira examples are always easier to prepare. With the strategic value of Confluence, it can be a little bit harder, but I believe partially we have them. The value of Confluence, it's also connected with the security of the data we are putting there. Let's deep dive into that, and maybe we will figure out after the webinar what we can produce in this area and help you with. The next question, what is the process mining approach you recommend to use with Jira?
Of course, for each point, it will be much different because, of course, Confluence is knowledge base, but still we need to manage user accesses, compliance readiness, etc. So if you need to know more about it, you can contact us, because if we need to tell you more about it, we need to next presentation for that.
Yeah, I think so. Let's move forward to the next question. With so many add-ons in the Atlassian marketplace, what is the good way to assess those add-ons, making sure it's the best fit for our environment? And it is really good, but a really complicated question, I would say. When we are thinking about us as a company who are deliver the value for our customers, it's always easier for us because probably we have the knowledge around many more examples than internal admin can have. On the other hand, when we know the products, we know who is producing them. It's always easy because of the relationship and the knowledge and the visibility if the product is properly created from the beginning. But sometimes finding out can be challenging, especially in the area when there are plenty of add-ons. I don't know any framework for choosing the best one, Simon, from your perspective?
For some of the add-ons, you can just check in DB if there is some updates on that add-ons, but you need to remember that some add-ons are used only for reviewing data, so we cannot go deep dive through it in the database. There is some plugins which can help you with that on the marketplace. You can do just workshop with your end users and ask them if they need some plugins. And usually the best way is just turn off some plugins and wait a moment, and maybe someone go and tell you that something doesn't work. So then for sure you will know that this plugin is needed on your organization.
Let's move forward because we have a question about the best practices for cleanup legacy project, backlog getting overwhelming, teams merge and start over on new projects.
Of course, it depends on your needs, but a lot of our customers just say that if our project is not used more than 1 year, for example, we can just archive it. So it's usually the best way. For some clients, we just archive only issues. In the same way, we can create some kind of automation that archive issues older than 1 year. But usually we move whole projects to archive. Then we will ensure that no, let's say, legacy projects are still on our instance and our instance can work faster.
What also I have in mind, this is a case similar to the migration, not with the lift and shift approach when we are taking everything and push it into the cloud or getting a little bit rid of the really old things, but getting doing a fresh start when we are creating something from scratches. And we are sometimes using this strategy for our old projects where the history is so long that we don't really understand why and what for something was created, I think 5 or 10 years ago. And sometimes taking the benefit from creating something from scratches, starting the new project instead of using the old one for years, can be really beneficial because we see a value by creating something which is meeting our current needs, not the past needs, for example. The next question, can you try as much as you can to make the UI as easy as possible for users, but some user will reject it or have a negative stance to it from the beginning? How can we deal with it? For example, the department heads want to start using Jira, but the employees do not see the value in it. So this is also, I would say, a hard question, because if the people will not see the value in the product, they will not using it, then we won't be having data. So anything, it will be simply useless. We are sometimes fighting with that. And this is, I would say, pure communication, talking to people, explaining why we need it, what for, how we want to use it, and making sure those people will understand. This feels like a really simple, but it's really hard in general to make sure that everyone understands, but the communication is a key in this area. We saw implementation from top to the bottom when it was rather saying you need to have something, but in general, we would rather say that the most successful are those which is the bottom-up approach, where the people feel that there is a need on their side to having a tool adjusted to their needs, and based on that, build it from down to the top. Okay, I don't see more questions, or if I missed something, then please shout out. If there is no more questions for today, then thank you very much for the attendance. For those of you who want to use the bonus, reach out to us. I know sometimes we are saying about that we cannot deep dive into more details, but landing really deep will take much more time than we have for this hour. Thank you for your attendance. I hope we'll see you on the future webinars we are hosting. Also, remember about the Knowledge Hub, and you will get access to it in a few minutes. How to get the bonus? Write an email to us and we will get back to you after the webinar. So you have both me and Simon email right now. Thank you very much for your attendance and see you soon.
Thank you very much and see you on next webinars.